Georgia, from Basque. Karen is our program manager for data and implementation. And Georgia is our program manager for effective data systems and professional learning. Both of them always contribute so much to our project. We really appreciate them. They are data queens. They keep us in line, make sure that we're on track with everything that we're supposed to be doing. So thank you guys for being here, and thank you for all that you do for Basque. And I'm gonna hand it over to them. I can progress the slides if you guys would like.
That'd be great. Okay.
Okay.
Well, I think I will start. And so the objectives for our didactic today are, we want to make sure that we're all clear and can identify the relationship between fidelity and outcomes. And from some of the comments in the chat there to the intro, it seems like many of you already understand that. And also to describe the measures that are included in our framework, the Basque MTSS-B framework, and then to develop a plan for how you're going to gather and analyze fidelity data. So we're going to review fidelity and measures. We're going to practice outlining implementation fidelity. We're going to give you a Basque example, and then give you an opportunity to think through how you might align fidelity across other initiatives that you have going on at Tier 1. So this is similar to our intro question. So if you were going to, in layman's terms, express to your other staff members at your school what fidelity is, I think we kind of captured why in the chat, why it matters. But like, if you were trying to help somebody understand what is fidelity, what does that mean to you? What does fidelity mean? If you could put that in the chat. Walking the talk. Doing something the way it was intended to be done, sunshine. That's a great, very short but effective way to communicate. Any other ideas for how you would describe what fidelity is? Staying true to something, yeah. So like fidelity on a broader scale, maybe not even related to implementation, has meaning. So it's being true to the thing that you're committed to. If it's an implementation of a practice, if it's a person in a relationship. Okay, well, let's move on, because I think we've kind of got some ideas there about fidelity. And then, so thinking about the link, very often in education, we find that we will get training on a practice, and then we'll look at the outcomes. Is it working? It's not working. And if we don't see the outcomes that we intended or hope to see as a result of getting that training, then we're like, well, it doesn't work. Well, it doesn't work if you don't actually do it, right? So what we know through research is that and we've shared this with you before, so just remembering this model might be a helpful way to communicate the importance and the rationale behind it to your staff members. So without effective implementation and the enabling context, even if you know an effective practice, you're not going to get the outcomes. Those are products. So any of those are zero, you get a zero, right? So it's really important that having the level of fidelity, effective implementation, doing the model as it was intended to be, is a requirement in order to get the outcome. So let's don't put our energy into something if we're not going to do it effectively. Okay. So just as a little review, which fidelity measures are being used right now that you know about in the Basque MTSS-B process? So you can type them in the chat, or if you want to unmute, you can give us one. You could try to list them all. Let's just see what we can recall and review. PFI, yep. And we did that in day 3. We got the results. We did it in day 2, got the results in day 3, and used that to kind of develop some action steps for improving. And the SAS, go Erin. So that self-assessment survey, which was done by all the staff in your on your campuses, help you to understand whether things were being implemented. Anything else? The practices survey, and it's a home run. Go Erin. Yes, if you want to go on to the next slide. So we have the primary fidelity measures that we're using are the self-assessment, TFI, and practices inventory. There is something called a walkthrough, which is a tier 1 tool, and we're going to be sharing that with you next year as something that you can use as sort of an objective look for measure on your campuses. So, and their fidelity measures are one of the 2 primary data sets that we're using in this way of work. So we're also going to be looking at some outcome measures, and we'll be sharing more of that with you about that in the coming months, and definitely be doing some of that at Summer University. So if you think about this first large row is what are the practices, inventories, the self-assessment, and the TFI that you're familiar with and that we've been using, and then the walkthrough, which you'll learn. So maybe these are tools that you might do right now. Some of these are annual practices, annual surveys, but you may do the practices inventory more frequently. You may pick a particular practice and do it periodically. And then the walkthrough usually is done once and sometimes twice a year. But if you're doing other things at tier 1, which most of the districts and schools that I'm working with have something else that they're also implementing at tier 1. So if you're doing something, if you're trained in it, you're quote implementing it, then it's important to make sure that you're doing it. So what are you using to assess that? Is there a measurement tool that comes with that particular approach? So like, for instance, if you use conscious discipline, they have a conscious discipline rubric, which identifies things and what it looks like when it's being done. If you're using something like Leader in Me, they have some tools. Now, you may be aware of other tools because we're not, like, I didn't go through the training. I'm just more familiar with it from an outsider. But they do have some checklists or things. So thinking through what are the practices that you have in place, and what are does it have an assessment to tell if you're doing it as it was intended? Staying true to what that model was? How do you know that it's happening? So we're going to talk to you a little bit today about how you might do that. And Georgia.
My turn. Okay, so we're going to go through kind of a mock-up of what it's like to develop a Fidelity tool. So I want you to think about, you can see my little dancing sandwich over there. We are going to think about the fidelity of making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And if you've ever done a task analysis or modeled this with people and you ask them to tell you the steps to make a sandwich, right? And then you're intentionally like misinterpreting their directions. I'm not sure if you've ever done that before, but there's lots of funny videos about it on the internet. So in the chat, I want you to tell me your look for items for someone making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. You can just toss a few in there. What does it look like if you're doing it right? What does it look like if you've successfully made a peanut butter and jelly sandwich? Give me some things in the chat. Nobody in here has made a peanut butter and jelly sandwich? I bet you have. Oh, Oh, you gotta collect the ingredients. I agree with you on that. It looks like bread with peanut butter and jelly in the middle. Oh, Maya said strawberry jelly only. Karen says 2 slices of bread. Andrea said 2 slices of bread. Gathering the ingredients. 1 slice has peanut butter, 1 slice has jelly. Oh, we have a debate here. Tanya says grape jelly. Okay, so you all listed a lot of things here. So let me walk you through how we built this out as a model. Maya, will you take me to my next slide? Thank you. So the first thing we need to think about is the practice, right? And conceptually, when we think about making a sandwich, there's really 3 practices. There's the preparation, there's the assembly, and then there's evaluation. Did you actually make a sandwich? So we had to break that into 3 pieces. Then we're going to break down what are the core components of each of those pieces. So now, Maya, you can take me to the next slide. Thanks. So you listed a lot of these. Collect the ingredients, collect the supplies. I love the comment about strawberry jelly if you're feeling fancy. Clean and organize your workspace, right? You can't, I hope you're not making a sandwich on the floor or in a dirty kitchen or in the backseat of the car. I've seen people do these chaotic things. I had a coworker when I was in graduate school who would bring all of her sandwich making supplies to class, and she would make a sandwich during class on the table because she said it tasted better when you made it fresh, which I respect but also was disgusted. The peanut butter is spread evenly on the face of 1 slice of bread, right? Because if you say spread the peanut butter on the bread, someone might put it on the crust. Someone might put it on both sides of the bread. So, like, yuck. So we have to be very clear about exactly what we're looking for. So we broke it down here. The slices are stacked neatly with peanut butter and jelly on the inside, right? Being very clear that we don't want the peanut butter and jelly on the outside of the sandwich because that is a disaster. And then for evaluation, we're thinking, okay, the sandwich needs to taste good to the person eating it. So don't serve Maya that grape jelly, peanut butter and jelly sandwich because that's not going to work for her. And that the sandwich is easy to eat with minimal mess. I included as an evaluation part, and no one on my team will be surprised that I added that. But I mean, if you just put in way too much peanut butter and jelly, it's going to be a disaster. It's going to be like a burrito situation where everything's just like coming out. So being very clear about exactly what it means to do this correctly. This might not be all the steps that you need. You might pilot this and realize you need a couple more measurable core components that were left out. So this is a process that we refine. Maya, will you take me to the next slide? And then finally, you have to build out your checklist or your evaluation measure. How are you going to measure the extent to which these are completed? Is it binary? Yes, it happened. No, it didn't. Is it a scale of how much you agree that it happened based on the observation? You get to decide what you want your tool to look like. We typically use a scale so that we can discuss opportunities to improve, but there's space for you to decide what makes sense for the process that you're trying to measure the implementation fidelity of. Okay, so now we have a new little sandwich that's dancing. The GIFs were really the only thing holding me together last week when I was building this slideshow. So I was thinking about, okay, now you have to try it out in practice. So you made your fidelity checklist, amazing. You take it out and observe people making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches or doing whatever practice you're evaluating. And that's where you're going to find out really quickly what's missing. Things that they're doing that you're not measuring, things that you're trying to measure and they're not doing, and you're figuring out where the opportunities are to improve your tool. Then you're going to make revisions and you're going to try it again and see how it feels. And eventually you'll get to a tool that covers all your bases, right? It covers all of the core components of your practice in a way that you can actually measure in practice. We don't want some huge cumbersome tool. That's not helpful. So you really have to distill it down to the most important pieces in a way that is useful for you. So here's the breakdown of what we just did and what we would ask you to do as you're developing these fidelity tools. So first, identify the practice. We did this when we were designing for active supervision and opportunities to respond and feedback and acknowledgments, right? Then you need to identify the core components. What are the big buckets that tell us that this practice is being done? And then define those objectively so that anyone could observe whether they're happening or not in context. Then you'll transition that to some type of checklist or scale that you use to measure the extent to which they're happening. And then you'll pilot the tool and revise it to make adjustments as needed. So let me show you an example of how we built this out for active supervision and monitoring. So active supervision and monitoring is a high leverage practice or a classroom practice that's pretty commonly accepted in the classroom management space, right, in the behavior space. So we were pulling from all kinds of different resources about what is considered, best practice there. So we ended up developing our own tool. That's the one that you have now. So we identified the practice first. Then I outlined the core components. And this came from our review of existing research and other measurement tools. We were really trying to distill it down to its purest form. So this would be like continuous monitoring of the classroom, proximity to prevent inappropriate behavior, adjusting the physical arrangement of the room, planning and delivering prompts of expected behaviors, and then reinforcing positive behavior with behavior-specific praise. So we broke that down into what we believe to be the most core components of active supervision and monitoring. And then we built in a checklist measure, the extent to which the person observing agrees that these things happened within the observation period. So they might not all happen every single time. That's okay. This is an opportunity to begin a dialogue with the folks that you're working with and to think about where your school might need additional support or training. That's the point of these implementation measures overall is, are we doing it? How well are we doing it? And where can we improve what we're doing?
So now thinking about that framework and the measures that we have for you already through your work with us, then thinking about other initiatives that you have going on, do they have a way for you to measure if the implementation is happening with Fidelity? And if not, could you use our basic framework to follow those steps that Georgia just went through? So if you go on to the next slide. In addition to identifying all of the core features of the practices that you're trying to make sure are happening in your building, there may be some overlap, particularly if you have something like conscious discipline, leader, and me, and are doing our professional learning. There are some common components to those. So when you're thinking about how you're having people assess implementation, you might be able to streamline because if there are common components, they wouldn't need to look at those things in multiple ways. So if you go ahead and think about, you have what you're looking for in MTSS-B and our work, think about where your other initiatives, core components, and where those overlap, and then you can consolidate your assessment measures. So if you go on to the next slide, one thing you might be able to do if you're interested, is use our basic format for the practices inventory. So here, this is a snippet from the master practices inventory, which has all of the possible practices that we shared with you over your professional learning and the critical components of those with the rubric. So I've put a space down here at the bottom. So if I had a school that was also doing conscious discipline, what are those core components of implementing conscious discipline that I would want to make sure that people are focusing on doing in order to say I'm being true to that model? So what we've done is we've made a copy of the practices inventory master sheet. And we're going to make it available. Oh, there it is. It's in your chat now. And it'll be on the resource link for your participant guide. So if you're interested in defining out for your other practices what those core components are and incorporating that into your assessment plans across all things that you're doing at Tier 1. And we're speaking here specific to behavior, climate, social kinds of things, but this approach would work for anything if it's an academic strategy or practice that you're trying to get people to do. So feel free to use it in any format that you want to. Okay. Georgia, anything else that you wanted to add before we wrap?
No, that's all I've got. We're happy to take questions if you've got them. The link to the resources is available for you in the chat, and it will also be on the Echo series document that has the recordings and the slides and those kinds of things on it. We'll include it there for you as well.
Thank you, Karen and Georgia, so much for that nice presentation. That was really informative and easy to follow. I hope you all take advantage of those materials so that you have a good way of creating some tools that work for your buildings. We really want to try to make sure that we have things that can be tweaked and adjusted to meet your individual needs. So thank you guys for sharing that and making that available to everyone. Oh, do we have any questions before we hop to the next, to our problem of practice? Any questions for Georgia or Karen? All right, well, thank you guys so much for that. We'll move forward.